Let's talk about the Academic Phrasebank, a very useful resource that you can use that will help you in writing your senior thesis. Okay, so first of all, what is it? Well, it's about a 77-page document that basically has a lot of sentence patterns. So this was designed actually for EFL learners who are in the research field in academia. So if you take a look on the screen there, it shows basically some parts of sentences, right? So take, for example, your classic thesis statement. So you see there about 7 examples that you can use to write a thesis statement. So for example, this paper contests the claim that blah, 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 all the way down to this account seeks to blah, blah, blah. So wherever you see the dots, you would fill it with your own original content. So for example, one of the major goals of your thesis is to show where there's a gap in the research or where there is something missing, and that what you write is going to introduce some new knowledge. So this box right here on the bottom of the screen shows you several patterns that you can use. So you can start out with the 3 transition words there. In the middle, you can choose from those 2 options. Some research has. I'm sorry, that's actually only one option. But in the third box, you have several options there that you can choose from. So this resource gives you many sentence patterns that you can choose. So you combine generic academic writing with your own original content to create sentences. Where did it come from? So this is from Dr. John Morley of Manchester University, and this has been part of his research. So it's very research-based, and the theory is pretty simple. So you see a complicated quote there. So it says, "It is now accepted that much of the language we use is phraseological in nature, that is acquired, stored, and retrieved as pre-formulated constructions." So in simple English, it basically means that much of our language is pattern-based, right? So you see the patterns on the left. So we have many patterns that we use in daily life. So for example, on the right, you see different patterns of greetings, right? We all know that. We all know these from the classic "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you, and you?" To "What's up?" And then take a look at the last one there, "Gladness time." So this is, if we were to hear this, if an English speaker were to hear this as a greeting, we would be surprised. We wouldn't know that would be an unusual greeting. So this doesn't exist. So I just made this up to show you that this is something that doesn't fit a pattern. So much of our language is pattern-based, and when we hear something unusual, we are kind of alarmed because we have expectations in terms of the language we expect to hear in certain contexts. So where do these sentences come from? Where do these patterns come from? Well, the sources are academic dissertations from the University of Manchester, 100 of them. So they just basically deleted original content and original ideas of the writers and just kept the most common generic words and patterns. So you can use these to copy and paste your own ideas. But is it ethical? You know, we've talked about plagiarism and you shouldn't copy and paste. So yes, it is ethical. It's okay, as long as it doesn't have a unique or original construction. It doesn't have clear ideas from another writer. It's up to 9 words in length and basically contains 4 generic content words. So what does that look like? Okay, so for example, look at these sentence patterns that show how to summarize a literature review. So all of these are fine because they're very generic. They don't show original thinking of one person. So for example, together these studies outline that that part of a sentence, many people have written, many researchers have written, so it's become almost cliche. It's very generic. So after that, after the dots, after the ellipsis there, you can supply your own original content. Please note that some content words are used. So content words mean specific words to a specific field. So for example, take a look at the third bullet point there. X is a major public health problem and the cause of. So this is just to illustrate an example. So you can replace the bolded words with whatever you're writing about. Okay, so when you see something bolded, it means that you should replace it with your own specific content words. Okay, now to the actual PDF document itself. So now let's take a look at the PDF document itself. As I mentioned, it's about 72 pages in length, which is quite a lot. So I'm going to highlight 3 really useful areas for you when you're writing your senior thesis. First, the major sections, actually all of these from page 7 to 34 are really useful. So I at least suggest you to peruse them, to read through them really quickly. So that's section 1. Section 2, under general functions, giving examples of support is really important. There's some useful patterns there. And just as a review in the third section, academic style, before you start writing, this is a good review on the rules of the English that you can use in your senior thesis. Okay, so let's take a look at section 1. On page 13 and 14, referring to literature. So one of the most time-consuming things in your thesis writing is reading. So you're going to have to read a lot of research. You're going to have to do a lot of research on previous work. So when you start to write about it, these are sentences that you can use. Okay, so for example, on page 13, general descriptions of relevant literature. So those, when you're writing sentences about what you read, these are patterns that you can use. Below that, when you're talking about previous research, this is how to introduce things that you would want to cite, right? So that's super useful. You can use this many times. Continuing on to page 14, these are more examples of how to talk about research papers, articles, websites that you've been reading. And they're very sophisticated and academic in nature. You sound like a professional academic. Okay? So let's take a look at, from the major sections, let's take a look at general functions. For example, giving examples of support. So this is on page 52, right? So what I noticed in your writing and academic writing too is that some writers, you'll make a general claim or statement, and oftentimes, I'll write, give me some evidence, right? So this is how you can introduce some evidence to an opinion or a general argument that you're making, right? So for example, X is a good illustration of, and then blah, blah, blah. This is certainly true in the case of blah, blah, blah. So you can just copy and paste these phrases in your own writing. All right, and taking a look at notes on academic writing, which is very useful. On to section 3. So this provides a good summary of the notes on academic style. 8 of them, actually. So this is a good review before you start your writing itself of the rules. So especially number 1 is important. You have to provide evidence. This is the most important aspect, I think, of your thesis. You have to show your research and you have to justify your claims. So it goes on to, vocabulary, to other aspects such as things that you avoid and being precise, all things that we talked about in academic writing too. So it's a good review. Okay, so that's a general introduction of the Academic Phrasebank. I hope you find it useful. I do use this resource. Hope you find it useful.